Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to another milestone episode. We're already at the 20th episode of Adad the Autistic Alien, and I'm very happy that you're still here with me. Today, I want to talk a bit more about conditioning. I know that I talked a lot about this already, but I thought it was worth doing a whole episode, and I will go into why I think this matters later on. But first, I want to start with the story that I think influenced a lot of my life. So, when I was 11, my grandfather died, and he was the only person in my childhood that treated me like a human being with its own will, taste, and head. There were no buts to what I wanted to do. He let me do it and took care of me if I hurt myself. But he never was overprotective or too rigid with me. That's why I loved him more than anything or anyone else in my life on earth. And today I know that my grandfather was very different as a father to my dad. Like almost the complete opposite to what he was for me, or like he gave my dad almost the complete opposite kind of space than he gave to me. Like, let's say, rather rigid, stern, not really approachable emotionally. And I strongly believe that this is because we undergo various ways of conditionings. Throughout our lives, we are confronted with certain things like, let's say, stereotypes, or what our brain makes into stereotypes to make a clean, neat picture of the world. And these stereotypes turn into conditionings. They are what I call role imprints. And I found proof for them in my own life when I got married. I don't know how many of you know that, but I got married in 2016 and I got divorced in 2018. And now looking back from the space I am in today, I strongly believe that me and my ex-husband didn't get a divorce because we didn't have enough love for each other, but because we were still so very conditioned, and it was so subconscious as well, into certain relationship patterns that we didn't actually stand the chance of making it. I even believe that even if we would get couples therapy or something like that, it wouldn't have worked out, simply because we kind of both needed to find our own voice first and needed to uncover our own trauma first. And what really didn't help was the conditioning that I got in. Maybe some of you know that everything is cool and fine, and suddenly when you're in a relationship with someone, you start to get jealous, for example. Yeah? And before, when it was just a fling and it wasn't something serious, you were not jealous. Yeah? That's one example for a conditioning. Or another example from my own life, I wasn't getting jealous, but when I married, suddenly to me it mattered what the outside world thought of me. And that just wasn't the case before. But suddenly it mattered how our garden looked, or what kind of furniture we buy. And I actually kind of rebuilt this house that I lived in with very beautiful furniture and every external wish fulfilled. But I was incapable of building a home with my husband, because that's not what we grew up in, each of us. For sure, I had a beautiful home, but there was so much unspoken. There was so much not being put on the table. And I think that's very normal for boomer generations. I don't judge that. But for me, as a very emotional being, it's super important to have an emotionally secure and safe and understanding home. And that comes through emotional communication. That comes through emotional maturity and the ability to listen to other people and how they feel without reacting all the time, and even having the space for other people to express themselves because they feel safe and they feel seen. Yeah. And I just don't think that that was something that anybody knew how to build back in the 90s, you know. So I'm not like judging. It's not about like complaining. I'm just saying that I was able to rebuild the look of it, but because I didn't have the right feel. Like I never, except for being with my grandfather, I had a beautiful childhood, you know, like my parents are super nice human beings. I love my siblings and we had a beautiful home. But then also like my parents got divorced when I was 15. So there was also some things not really being right, okay? And I just remember that all my childhood, like because I was always very emotional, yeah, and I was always too sensitive. Um I like I felt most at home when I was alone. Yeah. And now that's like, I realized that with my husband, that was also kind of what was going on. Like, we moved together, we got married, everything was fine. And then I worked more and more and more because simply, like, I wasn't able to, like, have a relationship simply because there were no, like, imprints for that. Like, you know, that there were imprints for relationships that included children. But to this day, I'm rather unsure if I want children. So that wasn't in the equation for us. And so I just like worked because that's like something I know I was able to do. I was capable of that. Yeah, my ego felt safe in that. Yeah. And because my husband was kind of sick, I also was kind of the provider. So I took like, my ego took a lot of pride in that, or like being able to care for my family. And like then all these conditionings started to pop up where, you know, at no point was it about how we truly felt. We just thought we felt good. But it was the conditioning, because it's kind of like it looks good, so it has to feel good too, no? Because that's how we were brought up, right? And yeah, it was so signed to fail, so to speak. And that's why I think it's so important that we talk about these things, yeah? Because I recently talked to someone I know about this, and she was married for like way longer time. She was like married for 20 years and she has children from this marriage. And she had the exact same experience, that she was like this free spirit and she fell in love with this man, and she got married, and suddenly it was like a different persona. It was still her, you know, it was still her humor, it was still her soul, her character, but it suddenly there was this like program running. You know, like I don't know how much you know about website development, but when you don't use like a program like Wix or Jimdo or Squarespace or anything, you usually use WordPress. And there you build the website with all the different things that you use over plugins, yeah? And I really feel like when we go into certain, it can also be like a job, you know, like for example, I started to tattoo. And already before, I was kind of OCD and very cleanly. But when I started to tattoo, I was getting nuts. Like, really. Like, you could, like, eat from any furniture in my house, from the floor, anywhere, you know, like, and, okay, that's good. But then I don't tattoo on the floor, you know. So, it can come from a lot of things. And it really feels like there is, like, this plugin that's resting there, and suddenly it gets activated and then it runs its program. And all the other programs, they kind of just have to go with it. Yeah? It's really weird. Because like so many times I realized that I don't really behave like myself, like I'm such a free spirit. Like most of my life I was either living abroad or I was just in Switzerland to earn money to live abroad again, and I was traveling. Like my main goal in life was to travel. And suddenly there is this me that wants to like have a very beautiful proper home that looks good for the outside and doesn't really know where to arrive, but definitely arriving somewhere, and in Switzerland we call the conservatives, we call them Bünzlis. And I really it felt like this Bünzli plugin is activated, yeah. And because I still wasn't conscious enough regarding my own trauma and not aware enough to really see what was mirroring. Yeah, I think I was 28. So I felt that something was off, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. Plus, then, my ego, what I realized is the ego loves these plugins. Yeah. Because then it's like, I'm the provider of my family. I work so hard. I work so much. And then my inner child that was like, I want love. And I only get the love I want if I find a way to communicate my needs. But I never had a space where I could communicate my needs without them being judged. So I won't do that. So yeah, let's work. And I'm so good. Look at me earning so much money, being able to pay for everything so we have a beautiful life. It was it was really weird, when I look back on it, it was like, whoa, okay. But when you're in it, you cannot it's the same that my friend said, when you're in it, it's really hard to see the program. It's really hard. And I don't even necessarily believe that we can get rid of the programs before they start. It's I don't know, there are some sicknesses that maybe lay there sleeping and then suddenly they get activated and then you have to get rid of them. Yeah. And I feel not maybe integrate them, heal them. And I feel it's the same with conditionings or these plugins that we have. They are not the same with each of us. But for me, it's, for example, that my perfectionism, yeah, when I want to do when I do something, it has to be super good. Yeah. Only if I do something for free, then maybe I recording this podcast. If I would ask money for that, I would rent a room that is absolutely soundproof and totally overdo the thing, that's just what I do. And I try to ease it. That's also one reason why I record this podcast, actually. But the thing is, that happens to me whatever I work. Yeah. So if I work in a restaurant, or even I helped my dad clean one time, and he was like, can you please stop cleaning so perfectly? I don't need to give my flat away to a new person to rent it. I just want it clean, And for me, it was okay, I see dirt there. I see dirt there, I can really go into things. And if I work in a restaurant, if that's my job, I will do it the best I can. And I will and then what the conditioning is that then I get very frustrated with people who don't do that. Yeah. And that's a conditioning, because in the end, I don't care. I'd for sure my job is easier when we work in a team if you also do your load of or your share of the work. But in the end, I want to be the person that does it that good because I care. And if you don't care, then that's okay. You don't have to care just because I care. Yeah, but I also don't have to. I cannot just not care because everybody else doesn't care. And I feel that's why I'm not so good as a team worker. Yeah, because it kind of it can trigger other people to believe I'm cocky or arrogant or whatever. But it's just I want to do things the best way that I can do them. Simply because that's how they should be done, in my opinion. But then that's also a conditioning. Yeah, as long as I can stay in my lane and be okay, I want to do it that good, and I don't care how you do it. Like, do it the way you want to do it, because your weight is perfect as well, although it isn't perfect in my opinion. Yeah, because I'm not the ruler of the world. I'm just one human being amongst like 8 billion. So my opinion isn't the valid one. It's just the valid one for me. Yeah. And when I can stay with that, then it's okay. But if I like, because of my conditioning, then think others have it as easy because I assume that they have the same conditioning, that's where it gets gaslighty and where it gets like bypassing and mean. And I think to understand that we all have these kind of sleeping plugins that will suddenly like pop up when a new situation arises. You know, that can be a new Insta influencer that you found that triggers something in you. That can be a new podcast you listen to. It can be a new neighbor that moved in. It can be an animal that you get. It can be anything, like a new job, a new partner, a new friend. Like even with friends, like now that I studied that for quite a while now. Wow. Like, you know, like the reason why I really dug deep into it was that at some point, like, I leashed out on my best friend because I thought that he did something wrong, but he didn't do anything wrong. And like, I realized that he never did anything for me to mistrust him that much. Yeah. But then I looked at all, like my best friend's male. So I looked at all the relationships with males I had, and not necessarily sexual ones. Yeah. I looked more from a friendship level on it. And I realized that, you know, like my ex-husband's conditioning was that he didn't talk about stuff. So he hid a lot of things from me. Yeah. And then there were like other people in my life that have like the male gender. So that let me down too. And so it was this, like when I was like dysregulated, when something happened, like let's say because of the website, because he's the developer of my website. So something happened with the website and I was dysregulated because it's my website, so it's my baby, it's my work, it has to work. And then I freak out. And then I suddenly projected onto him that he is not trustable or not trustworthy, although he never did anything to like do that. And that was where the conditioning kicked in. So I believe that conditionings and projections onto other people are going hand in hand. The conditioning is what I carry inside. The projection is what I carry inside I like perceive in the outside world. Yeah? And yeah, I just believe that there is this conditioning when you become pregnant, or this conditioning when you want to start a business. Like there are so many patterns that you are not aware that they were imprinted onto you until they get activated. And I feel that if we grow more consciousness around this subject of these very fine sub-levels of conditionings as we know them for now, when we can raise consciousness around this and like really put it into our words, you know, and into our actions, when we take care of each other, then it's much easier to solve them. Because often it's these conditionings and the projections that arise from them that actually hurt others. Yeah. And we cannot just think that there are none of these conditionings. They are there. So when we like involve this topic into our everyday life, I think it's much easier for us to understand that we are not at fault. You know, another reason why I record this is because I feel that the many people, or maybe almost all people, have the biggest issue in their life with their most important relationship, and it's the relationship to themselves. Yeah. And like, you know, like when we broke up, I asked my ex-husband, like, was it my fault? Like I kind of needed his because I knew that like something in me fucked up majorly, like my focus, like this was not the relationship I wanted to lead when I married him. It was totally not what we wanted to do with our lives, yeah. And now looking back and looking at the love I still have for him in my heart, I really understand that it were these conditionings. Like our conditionings also worked very badly with each other. Yeah, I was emotionally totally unstable and freaking out all the time, and he was emotionally unstable and eating everything in all the time. So this was not like there was no chance of us succeeding at that moment in time. And I realized that with both of us, it was because we didn't have an intact relationship with ourselves. And we both, which is very much shown in the example I just gave with me asking him, we both thought that we were the problem. Yeah? But we both were not the problem. I mean, we were the carriers, yes, of these mechanisms. But the mechanisms were the problem. And I feel that if we live in a society that normalizes that these sub-levels of conditionings are there and that they influence us and that we are not just powerful enough to get rid of them like without confronting them and without reflecting on it and without growing with that, I believe then maybe like our marriage would have had a chance. And I don't do that because I want to save that marriage. Like that's gone, I've moved on. But I just feel that a lot of times in any kind of relationship, this can also be a mother-daughter relationship, I mean, if you as a child had any experience with jealousy and then, or maybe you were replaced or you were deprived of love or anything, and then you suddenly have this as a woman, and then you suddenly have this beautiful daughter, and like I don't know, I don't have that, but I can imagine that that's triggering, and it's triggering because it's a conditioning in this society that always wants us to stay young and beautiful, but still have lots of experience and stories to tell. So, like there are so many conditionings, there are so many patterns. It's like crazy, the patterns that are imprinted on us. And, like conspiracy theorists might say that this is happening on purpose. I cannot I've never met a human being intelligent enough to build all of this. But maybe I just haven't met them yet. So I don't want to say that. But I just think it's that the normal human capacity of ignoring our own shadows results in systems which will inflict more of these shadows onto us. Like there are some very good examples in history to prove that what you fight will actually become stronger. I will just give you one. It's my favorite one because it's about weed. So before the war on drugs started, weed was more or less legal, and it was just grown outside. Yeah, it was grown outside with the sunlight, and it was more or less natural. Yeah, it was just a natural plant. Maybe we imported some seeds from India to America or whatever, but more or less natural, yeah. And then the war on drugs started and marijuana became illegal. So what did the smokers do, or the growers? They just took it inside. And in the moment they took it inside, they realized, now we don't need the weather anymore. We can control the weather now. So we can expose the plant to more sunlight than it naturally would get. And we can give it more water and more maybe artificial stuff to grow, and we can control it much better. And the only reason they did that was because it got illegal and they had to hide it. So already through that first step, the marijuana plant got stronger in its effect. And also the harvest got bigger because of the way they had to grow it. Yeah? Or the way they worked with how they had to grow it. Yeah? And so this continues to this day. It's still illegal, but it still gets stronger with every year. Like the things you can buy with how much THC they have inside, it gets stronger every year. Yeah? And that's just one example for That's just really how in this world, when you fight something, it will get stronger. So also just saying now, oh, I will fight these conditionings, or I will fight that these programs inside of my mind activate. I don't think that that's the way to go, because we cannot really, when we fight it, it will get stronger. But when we embrace it, we can integrate it. So when I understand that I have these buttons in my head that will deploy mechanisms that I maybe not even be aware of in the moment that they get deployed, I can start communicating with my friends and with my inner circle about these conditionings and about what this does to me, or like maybe how it shows in my outside. And then I can slowly and surely just embrace them and like integrate them. And then they are not a part of my behavior anymore. Yeah? Because in the end, it's like, what I say so often is that we don't learn through thinking. We learn through copying what somebody else does. Yeah, that's how we learn to talk. That's how we learn to walk. We look at how others do it, and then we try to do it ourselves. And I think it's the same with relationships of any kind. So first, maybe we had these role models that were good in some parts, but not good in others. And then we live what these role models lived in front of us until it hurts enough. So we really look at, oh shit, okay, that maybe is a conditioning that I don't want to carry on. And this maybe be a program that I don't want to live on. Yeah. And I think like alone through consciousness, this is done, like I believe that knowledge is such a big power, because knowledge enables you to understand that it's not only you. Like if I knew everything that I know now, this relationship would have been so fucking different. And it's totally fine that it wasn't, because I needed to learn all I had to learn to arrive here and maybe create a better relationship at some point in my life. Yeah. At the moment, I'm still super busy with like creating a very healthy relationship with myself. But so I just really believe, and that goes to any kind of relationships. Yeah. For example, like another example, my cat. I love my cat so much. And like I'm a free spirit, so I really like when people let me roam and do what I want to do. And this is what I perceive as like being loved sometimes. And so I knew that I wanted to let him out. I didn't want him to be a house cat. But when it came to letting him out, I was so scared that he would be run over by a car, or, like this super protective mom mode came up. And I had that before with friends, but never with an animal, because I respect animals for their instincts and their integrity and everything. And I don't necessarily put myself upon them or above them. And so it was very interesting for me to like observe this like super strong protection mode that suddenly came up. And then I talked to my mom about it, and she was like, you would never be able to live with him not being happy. And he's just a cat that needs to get out. And she was so right. I mean, now, like just yesterday, he came back home, and he like a lot of his fur is gone, and he has some like wounds. But he's acting like nothing is wrong. But now I'm just observing it. But like it happens a lot that he actually gets in fights and stuff like that. So I was at the vets like ton of time over the past 8 years. But still, like my mom then said, isn't it better if he just lives 1 year fully happy, and then he maybe like gets killed by a car, but at least he was happy for 1 full year. And that's how I broke the conditioning, because that's the cool thing about conditionings. They are not our own. We don't necessarily have an emotional relation to them. As soon as we have an emotional relation to something, it gets harder to change. Yeah? Because what is emotionally relatable is part of our story somehow. But the conditioning is rarely a part of our story. It's something that we already perceived when it was imprinted onto us that it was something wrong. Yeah? I never really thought that my parents had super good emotional communication. Yeah? But it was also not something that I was emotionally triggered by, per se, because I wasn't able to understand this pattern as a kid. So that's why it's so easy that when you see this conditioning, like being overly protective cat mom, you can just remind yourself what you actually want to be. Like, I want to be a loving cat mom that like gives her cat a happy life. Yeah. And that already then dissolves the mechanism. Yeah. To see like, oh, I'm doing that, but I don't want to be that. And for sure, in like romantic relationships, it's not that easy because often there we are emotionally entangled. But with a partner who can also express his emotions and has the emotional maturity to like hold the space for yours, I feel that the communication and the consciousness about these very like sub-level conditionings and mechanisms can help so much, and it's easily done actually. Yeah. Because once we feel safe with someone, it's less likely that we even get triggered emotionally as well. So yeah, I believe that's everything I wanted to say. Maybe if you want to reflect on this episode a little bit, you can look into where you maybe like, if you have any role imprints that you still live by in your life. You know, like there are so many, like, am I a good mom? Am I a good friend? Am I a good girl or boyfriend? Am I a good partner? Am I a good artist? Am I, you know? And these are all role imprints because at some point we looked at something and our subconscious was, yes, that's the definition. But our consciousness doesn't even remember that. And then suddenly we go into this mechanism and we realize, oh, that was when I decided that this is how it's going. But now I don't even look at it that way anymore. Yeah? For example, me as a child, at some point I decided that how my parents lived was how how a marriage should be. Yeah? How it should become and play out. But actually, no, they are divorced. So that's not how I want a marriage to play out, right? But I needed my like conscious brain to understand, oh yeah, 7-year-old me made that imprint of like, or the decision, that's how it is. And now like 30-year-old me has to understand that, no, that's not what I want for myself. And as long as these two collide, I feel like maybe some of us take longer to build the life of their dreams, which is not bad at all, because I feel that maybe our conditionings fight more or rub more strongly on what we want. And others are, let's say, just more in tune with what they were also conditioned to. So it's easier for them to live like this life that is comfortable for them, yeah, so to speak. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to write me an email to podcast@dadachi.com. That's DADACHI. And also, if you're like a frequent listener of this podcast, I really ask you to maybe send me a topic or two that you want me to cover, because it gets a little bit hard for me to come up with a topic every week. And I know that I can just talk about my life, but like I'm not really used to talking so much about my life, actually. Like I'm more of a person that deals with themselves when it comes to these things. So just if you like maybe have a topic that you would like me to talk about or whatever, just send me an email. I would be really happy about that. Of course, I will also find a new topic for next week myself. But yeah, I just thought I'll give it out there, so we'll see. Yeah, so I thank you so much again, and I wish you a lovely, lovely weekend ahead. Take good care of yourself, and if you reflect on these conditionings or the role imprints that you maybe have in your life, make sure to be nice to yourself and remind yourself that you are not, like, it's not your fault or your guilt or anything. It's none of that. It's just how we roll in this planet, that we like kind of have these patterns that then arise so we can dissolve them. And yeah, like all of them, you are not the only one with whatever arises. And yeah, if you want to talk about it, you can also reach out to me anytime. Yeah, so, and maybe you want to talk about that with someone you love, because as I said, the more we like put communal consciousness around this subject, the easier it will get for all of us to kind of clear that subconscious cache, so to speak. Yeah. And then we don't pass it on to our children and their children, which would be a lovely thing, wouldn't it? So, yeah, thank you so much and speak soon. Bye bye.